already there.
Yeah.
So you can find yourself. And I'll show you how to write your name, because you need to know how to write your name, because otherwise you feature as Elena. It's really funny.
Okay, well, how do we do that?
But you have to find yourself.
What?
You have to find yourself.
Dear participants, good day. We are about to start. Maybe we'll need a couple of minutes to have all our participants on board to our Zoom platform. And we will start maybe in 2 minutes.
Nu kaip, ne tai, kad demokratija yra brangesnė. Demokratija turi.
Well, I still don't see some of our speakers with us at this moment, but I think we can start, and I think that they will join us during the course of our discussion. Dear participants, distinguished speakers, friends, colleagues, welcome to our panel discussion, which is titled Crisis as a Possibility, a Glass into the Future of Eastern Partnership. My name is Hennadiy Maksak. I am the Executive Director of Foreign Policy Council Ukrainian Prism, and I'm part of this big network which is called Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum. I represent Ukrainian platform, and here we would like to launch our second event, which is devoted to the monitoring results and our recommendations towards the 20 deliverables of Eastern Partnership, maybe the new horizon, how we see it, and what we see as a progress achieved by Ukrainian side during the implementation, what are setbacks. We will discuss it during our panel, and I'm happy to introduce you our distinguished speakers, which are today with us. Andrius Kubilius, co-president of Euronest Parliamentary Assembly, Pavlina Rehor, European External Action Service, Vira Rahackova, advocacy manager of the Secretariat of Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum, Timur Luchin, second secretary of Embassy of Republic of Moldova to Ukraine, Michael Emerson, associate senior research fellow at the Center for European Policy Studies, Nataliya Andrusevych, CEO of Resource and Analysis Center Society Environment, and Andrii Chubyk, associate expert of the Center for Global Studies Strategy 21. But we will start with a short presentation we have completed at the end of 2020, and which was devoted to the monitoring of implementation of Eastern Partnership deliverables in Ukraine. And I would like to give floor to Irina Kosei, which is coordinator of the project of support of the EaP CSF UNP activities. and represents the Institute for Economic Research and Policy Consulting. Irina, please, the floor is yours. Maybe briefly what we have achieved during this monitoring and maybe some of recommendations we have elaborated, please.
Thank you, Hennadiy. Welcome to our discussion. My name is Irina Kase. I am the project coordinator of the Institute for Economic Research and Policy Consulting. The project that the Institute implements is financed by the European Union, and we support the activities of the Secretariat for the Ukrainian National Platform of the Civil Society Forum of Eastern Partnership. Before I start talking about the monitoring report of the Ukraine's implementation of 20 deliverables, let me first make a couple of technical issues. If you need the Ukrainian translation, we have it. So please go to interpretation and choose the Ukrainian channel, and then you will get the translation into Ukrainian. And also, I would like all participants to engage in the chat. And if you have any questions, please ask them in those who are with us in Zoom, please ask them in chat. Those who are watching us on YouTube, we are monitoring all the platforms. So YouTube, Facebook, ask questions there, and all the questions will be forwarded to the moderator. So thank you. And now I will switch to my presentation.
Передайте їй, що я її люблю. Я їй це передам. Вона знає, якщо це.
Okay, so
Ось прийшов батько.
The Ukrainian National Platform has been monitoring Ukraine's progress in implementing 20 deliverables of Eastern Partnership for the last 4 years. And you can see that there were 4 monitoring reports issued in 2017, 2018, 19, and the last one for 2020. So we've been closely watching how Ukraine is doing these deliverables. And here you can see the main, the final fundings of our experts. You can see that for the most deliverables, the experts noted that the deliverables are under implementation. Some of them are marked as fulfilled. These are security cooperation, research and innovation, and filling gaps in access to finance and finance infrastructure. I will go briefly over all the deliverables and the major issues that the experts noted. So on structured interaction with civil society, the experts noted that the strategic communication in promoting European integration has undergone negative changes despite significant support from the EU. However, we had progress on gender issues, which is the cornerstone of the association agreement and which has a positive practice of implementation at the government level decisions. On the strategic communications, the expert noted declining resource and political support for public broadcasting and ambiguous legislative initiatives to combat misinformation. On small and medium-sized enterprises, the experts noted that Ukraine is improving its capacity to cooperate with the EU and is actively participating in SME support programs. As I already mentioned, that the experts noted that Ukraine fully implemented the deliverable gaps in access to finance and finance infrastructure. However, there is still unrealized potential for further diversification of approaches to financial cooperation. Also, access to EU financial resources of Ukrainian entities is not transparent at the moment. About new job opportunities in the further implementation of local self-governance reform, Ukraine focuses on European practices, and experts noted that regional development strategies are being prepared based on smart specialization in all Ukrainian regions. On harmonization of digital markets, the rich digital agenda between Ukraine and the EU had a positive dynamic in a wide range of topics, from broadband internet access to the provision of public e-services and the introduction of e-commerce between EU and Ukraine. On the implementation of the DCFTA, the experts noted active implementation of the free trade area, Ukraine's readiness for enhanced economic integration with the EU. However, there were attempts to undermine the economic movement in the EU, or at least to slow it down. And from time to time, protectionist legislative drafts appear, such as requiring localization and public procurement, which does not meet the association agreement commitments. On the rule of law and anti-corruption mechanisms, Ukraine has created an institutional framework for anti-corruption activities, and it improved even during the monitoring period. At the same time, problems arise at the level of regulatory support and inconsistencies in procedural and personnel issues. On key judicial reforms, experts noted that in 2020, the work on judicial reform did not meet the stated indicators, and given the lack of political will, the judiciary, through self-government mechanisms, blocked resetting judicial governing bodies with independent international experts' participation. On the implementation of public administration reform, the experts noted that the reform of the public service has become a major reform in Ukraine. It had brought several positive changes in ensuring the formation of a professional, competitive personnel policy on competitive basis. The vast majority of the public administration reform strategy indicators were achieved in 2019, 11 out of 17. However, the year 2020 also showed an increase in politicization and manual management of staff selection for positions that should be filled on a competitive basis. On security cooperation, experts noted that there are still issues remaining in the field of cybersecurity. About the 10T core networks, I was the author of this chapter, so I can say that the new law of Ukraine on concession, which was adopted in 2019, harmonized legislation and procedures, and it allowed the first concession agreements for Ukrainian ports, Olvia and Kherson. However, the government did not prepare enough project feasibility studies to implement 10T projects more effectively and attract external funding. And also the government didn't meet its goal on the road safety indicators. On energy supply security, Ukraine showed high progress in implementing measures to improve energy security and form long-term energy policy in line with the European Green Deal. However, due to domestic political reasons, this progress has decreased significantly, affecting the implementation trends. On energy efficiency and use of renewable energy sources, there was some progress observed in the implementation of energy efficiency policy. At the beginning of 2020, Ukraine presented the concept of a national green energy transition, which was used as a basis for determining Ukraine's second national defined contribution to the Paris Climate Agreement. However, the change of government hurt the work prioritization in these areas, noted our experts. On environment and adaptation to climate change, the experts noted that these topics are currently not supported by a clear institutional reform plan. Despite some achievements, the implementation potential remains weak and volatile, and the state's environment and climate policy itself is not sustainable. climate documents planned for 2019 and 2020 have not been adopted. On visa liberalization and mobility partnerships, the restrictive measures introduced due to the COVID-19 pandemic exposed the issues of border management, the administration policy of external labor migration, and the implementation of the reintegration policy of Ukraine. And the next one, young people's skills. Ukrainian participants actively engaged in implementing tasks in youth, education, skills development, and culture. The programs EU for Youth, EU for Skills, and Erasmus+, they actively promoted mobility and quality of formal and non-formal learning and skills development. Eastern Partnership European School, this direction, it can hardly be considered as Ukraine's fulfillment. It's rather a question of the general level of realization of the specific goal of the EU in the field of formation of educational and academic initiatives of the Eastern Partnership, but this direction received high marks. And finally, research and innovation. There was positive trend in the Ukrainian participation in the Creative Europe initiatives, the mobility program for artists iPortunus, and projects named after Marie Sklodowska-Curie, providing equal opportunities for young people from rural areas and areas affected by the armed conflict. It still remains an obstacle to deepening integration. That's all from me. Thank you. If you have any questions about the monitoring report, or you would like to receive a copy of the report, please write to us and we will send it to you in Russian or in Ukrainian or in English. Thank you.
Irina, thank you so much for your overview. This is the general picture of our monitoring. I'm aware it is quite difficult to comprehend all the figures and all the pluses we've put in this table, but I think that, yeah, you could learn more from these publications, and please contact Irina's organization and they will happily to share what we've achieved in this publication. Now I would like to switch to our discussion, and the first I would like, and I'm privileged to give the floor, is Andrius Kubilius, co-president of Euronest Parliamentary Assembly. We've named this panel discussion as crisis as possibility. We know that this crisis have several facets. One associated to COVID-19 pandemic and all these chains that were broken during this process, be it economic cooperation, be it vaccines process, achieving vaccines. I think this is a very big issue and grave issue we have to discuss. Another issue is geopolitical one. We know what's going on in Belarus. We see political crisis in Georgia. We are aware of grave consequences of the war between Azerbaijan and Armenia. So basically, this is not the best time for Eastern Partnership to flourish. But still, from your position, Mr. Kubilius, what do you see? Is there the light in the end of the tunnel, and what could be the next horizon for Eastern Partnership? Please, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Really a pleasure. I will try to be, very brief. And unfortunately, at 11 o'clock, I will need to switch to another meeting. So, but I see our dear friend Michael Emerson, and since we had during the last period of time quite many, discussions about future of Eastern Partnership. So if I will leave, I hope that Michael will be able to continue some of our thoughts to discuss. First of all, I don't know how pandemic and things was connected with pandemic, how it can affect, future of Eastern Partnership. Of course, there are problems now, but I would like to speak much more about longer term perspective, something like 10 years, or 15 years from now. where are we heading with Eastern Partnership? That's my question. And from that point of view, I think that exactly what is happening in Belarus, what is maybe is starting to happen in Russia itself, I see as really something which can open totally new horizons for Eastern Partnership, at least for trio countries, which have association agreements. And even political crisis, which we now are concerned, in Georgia, for me reminds, in some way, Western Balkans, which usually when you are thinking about Western Balkans, then usually you are talking about some kind of, political crisis which came again to one or another country. And EU has very simple answer, to such kind of developments in some of those Western Balkan countries, with the language saying in a very clear way that if EU will not come into that region as quickly as possible, then really this region can be totally destabilized either by Russia or by China or by Turkey even. So that's why when I see some kind of those developments like in Georgia, I'm saying, okay, no, it's a problem. Our friends in Georgia maybe are making some big political mistakes. But what should be our answer? Our answer should be to look for possibilities how really to stabilize at least Georgia and to stabilize Eastern Partnership region, looking for possibilities for much more ambitious EU policy towards that region. And since, as I said before, as you mentioned, some very important developments started to happen in Belarus, and maybe they will happen in also in Russia, where people are starting to demand much more of freedom, of democracy, of human rights. That again, I think could influence longer term and more ambitious EU policy towards Eastern Partnership. EU policy towards Russia and EU policy towards Eastern Partnership, in my view, are very much interconnected. So from that point of view, really, it was very interesting to listen to a report on deliverables, but I am quite critical about this language of deliverables, which was, how to say, introduced by EU at some time ago, which then puts some kind of question marks of where Eastern Partnership region is moving. What is the direction? What is the final, let's say, destination? And then when we're talking about the deliverables, it's very difficult to understand. So in which place of that road, for example, Ukraine is now. So I would look into possibility to bring back much more clear language about implementation of association agreements, where Ukraine is doing also progress. Maybe I will not make a secret, but we are planning exactly with CEPS, with Michael Emerson, quite soon to present a special report where three of Eastern Partnership countries were compared with Western Balkans advancement. And it seems that both groups are very similar. There are things where Eastern Partnership countries, even especially, for example, the same Georgia is looking better than Western Balkan countries. There are things where Eastern Partnership countries are a little bit behind. But that brings very clear question not to Eastern Partnership countries, but to EU itself. Why? What is the need to have two different approaches to very similar countries, to very similar regions, which are struggling with still post-imperial, post-dictatorial, post-Soviet or post-communist impacts, and where really much more clear vision and road towards integration, maybe partial integration or whatever, could be really very important tool to assist those countries with moving forward. So that's my message. Really, situation, at least how it goes now, how I see now, in my view, is opening. It's opening new doors for much more deep discussion about the future of Eastern Partnership policy. Now, on both sides discussion, on Eastern Partnership country side and on EU side. And I hope that, that discussion can bring not new set of deliverables, but much more clear, vision of where, where the countries are needed to go, and what how long road is still ahead of them. So that's my point. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for your observations you've shared with us, and the intention that you have to leave us earlier. Some questions maybe from participants, but the first one is from me. We know that you are one of the strong proponents of the Eastern Partnership trio. Do you think, or do you observe, is there enough appetite in Brussels to advance this initiative into New Horizon?
Well, I think that we need to work. At least I see really that this trio is becoming some kind of much more broadly discussed topic. Recently, we saw a really very important letter from trio ministers, foreign affairs ministers, and with clear message that more ambitious approach is needed. We need to look what kind of really practical and implementable goal can be offered. That's what we are going to discuss in nearest future. We are planning to have Euronest Parliamentary Assembly at the end of April. I hope that till that time, really, we shall develop some of our strategic ideas. And I hope that we shall be able, to raise appetite also on EU side. Since, as I said, there are some of those big geopolitical developments around, where I think it really, it would be very important for EU institutions, for EU, political leadership, not to lose that momentum, and to bring back some kind of geopolitical language, which EU sometimes is forgetting. So that's my view.
Thank you so much. Now let us move to our next panelist. We have with us Pavlina Rehor from European External Action Service. Ms. Rehor, my question would be simple in that way. Roughly a year ago, there was communications on both on European Commission and your service about the future outlines of Eastern Partnership, but till that time, there is no clear indicators and no clear prospects we can compare with the ideas posed in the document. Could you maybe share with us some details or your plans? How do you plan to frame the next horizon for 5 years in Eastern Partnership? Or maybe you see already some concrete ideas you could also put to these new deliverables we have in this period. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It is my pleasure to represent here the EU Delegation today, and the views of the institutional views of the European External Action Service. And also thank you for presenting the report. I'd be very interested in receiving it. And I think it shows also the importance of civil society engagement in the success of the Eastern Partnership. From our point of view, I would like to first start by stressing the appreciation of the commitment of Ukraine to the Eastern Partnership, and also of the active and valuable engagement. This will be needed, and we count on Ukraine's support and constructive approach in preparations of the Eastern Partnership Summit in Brussels this autumn. The summit should focus on concrete and tangible proposals for future cooperation. And this should include also post-COVID recovery, resilience and reform agenda, all points that you've mentioned and that were also touched upon in the report. As proposed in the joint communication and discussed with Ukraine and other partners and stakeholders during consultations in autumn, the future Eastern Partnership would focus on enhancing the resilience as the overarching topic or goal and 5 main pillars for cooperation. This includes economy, the rule of law, green transition, digital agenda, and society. This will include further economic integration with and among partners. We further expect that the new priorities will allow us to increase our cooperation in other areas, such as connectivity, energy, transport, as well as security. We believe that it's important to build links not only between the EU and partner countries, but also among partners themselves. And I think that the 3 countries that have association agreement with the EU are a good example of that. A joint staff working paper is currently under preparation, and it will be issued in spring this year. Presenting a new set of concrete and measurable targets based on last year's communication, including specific areas for investment in the context of the post-COVID economic recovery. In the joint communication on the future of the Eastern Partnership, resilience will be the overarching objective, as already mentioned. We will address jointly the common challenges in a changing global environment, which reaches basically across many issues and topics, from judiciary to climate, and from civil society to security, and for the first time also health issues. As regards security aspects, this was also mentioned in your report, and we know this is something of high importance to Ukraine. It will keep contributing, the EU will keep contributing to the knowledge and expertise sharing with partner countries, and will keep involving partners in specific security aspects. And this was also mentioned, I think, in your report. This includes in particular the possible participation in CSDP missions of partner countries, but also cooperation on important issues like hybrid threats, cybercrime, and improving cybersecurity, for example, through the Eastern Partnership Cyber Resilience Program. Particular attention will be given to the 3 associated countries, of course, Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova, through continued support for the full implementation of the current DCFTAs. And the informal DCFTA ministerial meetings have become a useful format to exchange on that matter. Of course, what is important from our point of view is the continued efforts on reforms, which are key for the success of the Eastern Partnership, of the EU relations with these countries, and of sustainable development of partner countries. This is particularly important when it comes to core values, and these include rule of law, good governance, fighting corruption in Ukrainian context. I would like to stress also judicial reform, which is very important. These are fundamental areas, and apologies, I probably lost the connection for a moment. Just to say, to finish my remarks, these are fundamental areas, and they remain, let's say, a stepping stone for Eastern Partnership and for our cooperation. And since the pandemic was also mentioned, of course, the EU remains fully committed to continue supporting Ukraine to fight the pandemic, and also to work on sustainable economic recovery. And we have been providing also quite strong support to Ukraine in this context. This is a short introduction. I'm happy to answer some questions. Over to you.
Thank you. Mrs. Rehor, and I think that this is a good introduction, and thank you that you unveiled some plans of European Commission and European Union about the future frame of joint staff working documents. It's indeed very interesting, and thank you that you mentioned security dimension, which is very important for Ukraine, and we stress it both on non-governmental level and on governmental level. Some proposals were already made in our activity of the Civil Society Forum. We proposed to create an intergovernmental platform which will be devoted to security dimension explicitly, and maybe I think in Ukrainian terms we do expect that both on bilateral level and maybe in form of multilateral cooperation, we expect EU countries to join Crimean platform, which is now is in preparation phase. Now I would like to give the floor to great friend of Ukrainian National Platform, Vira Rahackova. Vira is representing Secretariat of Civil Society Forum. Vera, I know that you've made a similar report, but on 6 countries. You've asked different platforms, and you have some desk research on this issue. Could you prompt some results of this monitoring, and maybe what is the civic perspective of the future of Eastern Partnership? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Hennadiy, and many thanks for inviting me for this very interesting event. And indeed, congratulations on your 4th report on the implementation of the EaP roadmap in Ukraine. I think it's a very comprehensive report which serves very well the stakeholders both in Kiev and in Brussels. And as you mentioned, the Civil Society Forum has been very active in terms of monitoring the implementation of the past roadmap since its inception in 2016-2017. And then on the ongoing basis, basically via providing input within all policy areas which are covered, being 87 milestones and targets, combined with 94 means of implementation and more than 70 different responsible actors. We, as I mentioned, we have been commenting on the roadmap, assessing it in 2017. Then we ran several consultations with the members of the forum, which resulted in many documents and country reports. I mean, our ongoing presence in the platforms and panels facilitated the forum members with the possibility to provide, imminent input to the issues that were discussed in terms of the implementation of the deliverables. We also ran quite wide consultations on the future of the Eastern Partnership, and we contributed to the consultation which was run by DG NIR, of course, to which many of you and many actors present here also contributed. And then we reshaped the messages in a sense that we would like to impact the look of the new roadmap and new deliverables. And we presented a quite comprehensive list of the civil society recommendations in the last round of the EaP platforms and panels in the second half of 2020. Those meetings took place online, so basically we were able to bring in even more civil society representatives. At the moment, we are finalizing the work on the thematic policy papers, which are covering 8 policy areas, and which are looking both at the impact of the COVID-19 on those areas in terms of long-term challenges and opportunities, but also aspiring to assess the impact of the implementation of the EaP deliverables pertinent to given policy areas. And yeah, sometimes this effort has to be made against the backdrop that basically at the beginning of the implementation of roadmap, there was no baseline established. So sometimes it's quite difficult to depict the real impact the deliverables made on the ground. But we have had some very interesting results, and I would like to indeed announce these papers coming up very soon, and there will be also an event presenting the results of this comprehensive policy work. But as for the overall assessment on the current roadmap from the civil society perspective, I mean, I cannot go into specific details in all policy areas, but just a couple of remarks. Generally, I mean, the assessment is that these were quite useful measurable benchmarks. However, sometimes the milestones are quite technical and even not ambitious enough. So they are overly quantitative and lacking also country specifications. And this makes it quite difficult to assess the effect and the impact of the overall endeavor, as I tried to already point to. And moreover, the quality of implementation. So this is the key issue. And then, of course, this impacts also the way how the results can be communicated to the citizens, which is, I would say, quite a weak link of the whole exercise. The way how the still current roadmap is being designed also allows for certain cherry picking, and this is quite visible, especially in some very important key areas like rule of law, judicial reforms, and then consequently we are running a bit circles, getting because of the unfulfilled commitments of the EaP governments, we are running into problems like, the crisis in Georgia is kind of an illustration of this. Then the issue of cross-cutting deliverables, gender, civil society, media. I mean, you touched upon when Irina was delivering the results of your reporting, the gender has been on gender. There have been quite good results in Ukraine on the course of the last year, and I think this is also thanks to the pressure at the multilateral level, because gender was one of the cross-cutting deliverables that was really picked by the stakeholders and pushed, namely thanks to some of the member states like Sweden. But on the other cross-cutting deliverables, the results are not so encouraging. And here, representing civil society, namely the aspect of civil society environment has been quite pertinent. And here, we feel for the future there should be more priority given to this area. Also, another aspect maybe of the current roadmap, that the deliverables are not very well linked and conditioned mutually. And if this is something that could be, better fixed in the future roadmap, that could bring more better results in terms of the quality of implementation. And then the regional aspect, of course. The roadmap is a kind of embodiment of the regional policy, but at the same time, the deliverables are on the one hand not well country tailored, and on the other they are not also delivering very much on the regional aspect. So meaning that there are not deliverables which would be, for example, mandatory to implement by several EaP countries together. So somehow pushing this regional cooperation further, and this is an aspect I think was also mentioned by the previous speakers. So as for the future, and Hennadiy, please stop me if I'm speaking for too long, I'll just make a couple of remarks. So with the summit being pushed to the October 2021, which is not the best news, I would say, personally. And of course, with all the difficult context you mentioned, Hennadiy, in your opening remarks, what's going on in the region, it's quite difficult, I would say, for the EU to plan. And the Eastern Partnership partners, of course, to plan for the summit, especially in terms of this long-term, more political vision, what should be offered. And I can feel it. I mean, I'm not a politician, I'm rather a practitioner, but speaking with people in Brussels, I can see there are many hesitations and problems in terms of how to shape the summit and what to plan for it to deliver. That's one thing. It's this larger political vision, and we can talk 10 years, ideas, but we are now at this point in time, and there should be something, some vision formulated at this stage already. As for the roadmap, that's for the new roadmap. That's another a bit problematic aspect, because from the civil society perspective, we had the idea that there's quite a straightforward process which is planned, and there's a timetable. But with the end date for the new roadmap to be published still being pushed and not being quite clear, and also the way how the new roadmap will be looking like, because we are hearing different ideas, starting with more general targets down to the level of very concrete specific deliverables. So I think we are a bit in a state of kind of innuendo. Nothing is much happening. There is everyone feels there is time because the summit is only in the autumn. But for us, of course, it would be much better if there's more clarity. Also, because the civil society for the future roadmap is planning quite a comprehensive multi-annual project, which should be monitoring the new roadmap. So I think I will stop here for now, and thank you again for inviting me.
For your precise assessment from civic perspective, what's going on with Eastern Partnership and New Horizon. I think we share here in Ukraine what you have on this multilateral findings, and I think we are to advocate these ideas about more push or more room for civil society in new perspective of the Eastern Partnership. Now I would like to move to our next speaker, and I would like to give the floor to Michael Emerson, Associate Senior Research Fellow at the Center for European Policy Studies. Michael, you are well known in Ukraine, and you have been dealing with Eastern Partnership since the inceptions. Many of your findings are still in this heart of this Eastern Partnership. So if you are asked about your pieces of advice to new roadmap, to New Horizon, what would you advise to European Union? What new mechanism you could put in this new document, new roadmap of Eastern Partnership? Michael, the floor is yours. Michael, do you hear us? We don't hear you.
Okay.
Yes. No. Please press once again.
Yes.
Yeah, fine.
Unmuted. Good. I have prepared some comments on your interesting report, which was tabled. I come to the bigger question you pose at the end. But first, on your report, it's quite interesting for myself as well as Veronika Movchan, who is with you there, although I can't see her at the moment. But Veronika and I have just been completing a fresh exercise assessing the performance of all the three DCFTA states on all of the main chapters of the association agreements. And we've been doing a rating schema, which actually is extremely comparable to what you've been doing with your 20 deliverables, well, not yours, it's the Commission's 20 deliverables, and we identify 26 chapters. So I make a couple of methodological points on this, first of all. The first, a very simple one, is, frankly speaking, in your rating system, there are too many pluses and no minuses. So from the symbolic presentation, I'm a bit worried about this. In our work that I referred to, it's very comparable in that we establish 3 basic ratings: doing well, work in progress, doing not so well. And we give to each of these numerical grading, 3, 2, 1, which avoid the, perhaps unintentionally, but the suggestive 3 pluses, 2 pluses, or 1 pluses. Well, frankly, for the 1 in our language, that's a minus. Okay. Second point, which is not your responsibility, but it is the lists of the 20 deliverables compared to the complete or more independently viewed assessment of the content of the association agreements and DCFTAs. Now, we understand that these 20 deliverables were chosen by the Commission in order to be user-friendly for all 6 Eastern Partnership states. Now, this results in 1 or 2 problems of bias. This is not your problem, but it is the EU's problem and the Eastern Partnerships problem. In your 20 deliverables, there's one glaring omission: electoral democracy. Presumably because it wasn't thought a very congenial topic to discuss with President Lukashenko and President Aliyev. Well, nobody said that, but I mean, that's the only interpretation I can make, because this issue of the quality of democracy is really #1 issue, the single most important issue, which leads me on to another question of comparison. In your findings, you have 15 out of 20, which are kind of in the middle, work in progress. In our findings, actually, we stretch it out more. We have more good points and more bad points, and a lesser predominance of this middle way. And in particular, on electoral democracy, whether the Ukrainians here are Zelensky supporters or not, that's not the question. The question is whether the process of electoral democracy in Ukraine for the presidential and parliamentary and recent local elections has been basically correct or falsified, as we see in certain other countries. Well, here, as I say, whatever you think about Zelensky, the electoral processes have been correct. And so I give, Veronica and I give a high mark to Ukraine on that score, which is of course missing from your 20 deliverables. The second related point is you have one item number 8 is DCFTA. Of course, the DCFTA explodes into 20 significant subheads, most of which are inapplicable in Belarus and Azerbaijan because they don't have DCFTAs. But this is missing much of the most important content of the agreements for Ukraine. One could discuss the service sector, one could discuss public procurement, for example, where Ukraine has scored strongly. Okay, well, so much then for the methodology. So, you know, you've done serious work here. We will publish, Veronica and I and other colleagues, with Mr. Kubilius, MEP, because we're about to publish quite a long document for which he's written a foreword, and we've been working with him on this. So we will publish, I think, next week, a substantial document, which leads into the strategic questions. Broadly speaking, we are critical of the status quo and agree with the three associated Eastern European countries that there's no sense of strategic destination and priority in the present status quo. And this is disappointing for Ukraine and the other two states and for us as independent observers. The question is, what could be done about that? In our view, and this Andrius was kindly giving publicity for our forthcoming publication of next week, so I shouldn't say too much about that, but just a little bit to answer your question. I think one can see a continuum of possibilities from the incremental and immediately operational through to the more controversial long-term structural developments, but a continuum. The continuum can start from the very recent Association Council that Ukraine had, where there were some elements there which are quite interesting. One was Ukraine joining in Green Deal, very big. If you do it seriously, it's very big. Secondly, the agreement to review the association agreement before the next summit. And thirdly, some elements of further trade liberalization to be negotiated. Okay, that is on the Ukrainian side. More broadly, for the three East European countries, you should all have noticed the joint letter that the three foreign ministers submitted to the EU institutions quite recently, in which they are advocating deeper sectoral integration on many heads, energy, digital, environment, etc., and going on to propose dialogue with the relevant sectoral councils of the EU on these subjects. Now, that would be an institutional innovation that is asked for, which is perfectly possible to be satisfied. It's already basically done with the European Economic Area countries. So that's a next step. But then what is more original in our contribution is to go on into a fuller investigation of the conceivable possibilities for progressive institutional integration of the associated countries, that's both the Balkans and the East Europeans in with the EU. Well, I won't go into the detail, but we could discuss the European Parliament, we could discuss the European Commission, we could certainly discuss the consultative committees, the Economic and Social Committee and the Committee of the Regions, and we could discuss the conditionality that would be attached to a set of progressive institutional developments. And all this wrapped up together could be viewed as designing a new momentum for the process. So I think that's enough for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's very interesting, and we are looking forward to your presentation, which will be next week. I think it's a very interesting perspective to see on the different tracks European Union has vis-a-vis Eastern Partnership, vis-a-vis Western Balkans. I think it's very interesting, and we really looking forward. And thank you for your valuable comments on the methodology. I think they well noted, and we will try to see how we could just adjust and fine-tune our research in new perspective, in new horizon. Now we move further with our agenda, and we have Nataliya Andrusevych of the Resource and Analysis Center, Society and Environment. Nataliya, Michael already mentioned about Green Deal, and now in Ukraine it is a buzzword. from your perspective, how serious and how ambitious Ukraine is to implement this Green Deal? And do you see it is only a positive sign? And if you can also just expand this perspective for other Eastern Partnership countries, it also is very welcomed. The floor is yours, Nataliya.
Thank you, Hennadiy. Thank you for invitation, and also thanks for this discussion and mention European Green Deal, which is really now very in trend in the European Union and Ukraine, and also in the framework of Eastern Partnership. And now it's a unique moment to influence the future priorities of Eastern Partnership and make sure they correspond to these greening trends. On the one hand, is due to the reform of Eastern Partnership itself, and on the other, due to the adoption and implementation of the European Green Deal. So European Green Deal, it's not only about new strategies, legislation, actions in different sectors, but it's also a way of change thinking and approaches to implementation different policies, including Eastern Partnership, by integrating climate and environmental consideration. So speaking of the impact of European Green Deal on Eastern Partnership, I would like to highlight two levels of such impact: on the Eastern Partnership policy as such, and on the Eastern Partnership countries. The first changes for the benefit of greening the Eastern Partnership agenda are already evident. Because we have separate priority within future EaP agenda called Together Towards Environmental and Climate Resilience. While the main focus of the EU Green cooperation with Eastern Partnership countries is to fulfill national commitments under the Paris Agreement on climate and decarbonization of economies, the EU support also will include many other environmental areas like air, water, soil pollution, energy efficiency, reduction of coal use, waste management, preservation of biodiversity, etc. As to the regional dimension of the Eastern Partnership, we shall expect more systematic and focused efforts on the previously launched cooperation lines in environmental, energy, and climate fields, with a significant increase of national support, as well as integration of European Green Deal issues into other areas of cooperation, like cross-border cooperation, science, education, development of civil society, and others. Moreover, a different mechanism might be created to account for the cross-cutting nature of the European Green Deal and the need to coordinate the efforts with many other sectors. Greening the European Eastern Partnership is a positive trend. However, the focus shall be made both on policy making and on specific steps and initiatives. Also in terms of European Green Deal implementation, the problem areas for EaP countries like CBAM shall be reflected in the Eastern Partnership final documents. Also, this bilateral dimension will impact the bilateral dimension of the Eastern Partnership, relations between the European Union and each Eastern Partnership country. There are important differences between Eastern partners that affect the European Green Deal impact on their national environmental, climate, and other policies. They include Eastern Partnership countries' commitments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, available special bilateral formats, and the related commitments on implementing environmental requirements of the EU acquis, countries' membership in the energy community, the scope of financial and technical assistance from the EU, and trade relations with the European Union. First of all, it shall be noted that Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine are less dependent on the European Partnership regional dimension of their relations with the EU, since their cooperation is based on the association agreements covering a broad range of issues. To some extent, this is also true for the bilateral relations of the European Union with Armenia, where the new framework agreement is provisionally applied. For Azerbaijan and Belarus, unlike other Eastern partners, the priority channels for cooperation are the Eastern Partnership tools. It means that political and other factors of European Green Deal impact through the Eastern Partnership are more relevant for these two countries. On the other hand, association agreements where they are in place make the European Green Deal impact through the Eastern Partnership different and more efficient for such countries. It is related to the fact that association agreements may be used by the EU as platforms to promote the European Green Deal targets and the Eastern Partnership objectives, especially when these agreements are viewed as part of the EU Eastern Partnership policy. The priorities of the European Union for its bilateral cooperation with Eastern Partnership countries in order to promote the priorities or objectives of the European Green Deal are still under development. And we are waiting for the summit, Eastern Partnership Summit in autumn to have more clear priorities, more clear position. The key focus areas will largely depend on the Eastern Partnership countries themselves and their civil society. And here it's a very good example of Ukraine, and because Ukraine has a proactive position towards European Green Deal, including civil society and business community. And Ukraine actively participates in multiple discussions on the matter, even informal consultation with the European Union. So here Ukraine is a good example for other Eastern Partnership countries, how to deal with the issue and how to assess the European Green Deal priorities for their countries, possible flagship initiatives for their country, and possible formats of cooperation. Thank you.
Nataliya, thank you so much. We still understand that we are in the middle of a big journey to the Green Deal implementation, and I think that Ukraine could be a pioneer for other Eastern Partnership partners in the way how to implement it and maybe how to avoid some complexities if they appear during this process. And now I would like to switch to another issue which goes hand in hand with climate, environment, with issues of Green Deal. This is energy, and I'd like to give the floor to Andrii Chubyk, who is Associate Expert of the Center for Global Studies Strategy 21. Andrii is one of the authors of this monitoring. So please, what is your perspective about energy security? It was also mentioned there are some technical issues with the mic.
I'm listening to you.
Okay, so my question is energy security. Is this still a big issue for Eastern Partnership and for our cooperation with the European?
First of all, I would like to thank to Nataliya. Nataliya just recently made a very broad overview of the different aspects related to generally energy and environment background, which will apply to our relations in coming years, because Green Deal is a very fresh initiative, which is to my point of view, is not properly reflected on a national level so far. In Ukraine, for instance, at the beginning of last year, our government started very active preparation of national agenda for green transformation. But then, due to COVID, due to growing concerns and challenges in energy sector, it was postponed. Right now, what I'm seeing, we step by step recover our engagement into discussion with European colleagues about future perspective regarding Green Deal, regarding low carbon development, but it's more long-term perspective because we are trying to understand and accept current situation we are living in, our possibilities in fact, not desirable, our financial capacities, and not the least, security environment all around us and possible implications in view of different developments in Europe and even globally. Because very prominent example was during basically this winter period, when climate change, I would say it's the biggest reason, caused unprecedented growth in gas prices all around the world, and it was followed by different technical implications, and altogether it made the difference between summer prices and winter prices manifold different and as it was. So right now we have to take into consideration these issues. We have to look on options how to work given capacities of each Eastern Partnership country, and a way of sustainable cooperation with the EU. As for the ongoing summit, I would wish that at least we will agree with European countries, with the EU as a whole, that security aspects should be very top in priority among next piece of plans for cooperation under Eastern Partnership framework program. And it will touch not only energy security as such, because we have talked for at least 10 years about energy security, but it was not made, not always. It was made really a matter in our relations, and at least Ukraine is tackling this issue still. If we can speak about practical aspects, it's a very famous case about Nord Stream 2, when the EU is divided basically into different camps, which is against or pro this Russian project, And in such way, we are not working on common energy security aspects, definitely. The same remains actual for next period of time, and that's why I'm pretty sure we have to discuss and have to advocate for more security aspects within Eastern Partnership. I would say it should include also civil security aspects and even military security aspects, because during recent 10 years, our region expected growing number of conflicts, which were brought to active phases from frozen or even started from scratch. And right now, if the EU would like to have sustainable and effective policy towards Eastern Europe, towards Caucasus, it's a matter of fact that the EU should go deeper into security aspects and work with each and every country given this context. What I would wish for the next period of time as well, as said by previous speakers, it's Green Deal, and in our cases, the EU should also accept that our countries has not so much capacities in financial terms, in even in state support mechanism, as it was, for instance, in certain European countries with regard to support renewable energies with green tariffs, with market premiums and other aspects. For instance, Ukraine is still doing a lot of efforts to solve the matter with green tariffs, and it's this situation is complicated by the responsibilities taken previously on the level of state regulation in order to ensure feed-in to the grid, ensure payments for supplied electricity and other aspects. Now we have a really big challenge for the energy sector when it cannot produce so much financial resources in order to pay for growing part of green energy, and at the same time ensure more or less accepted level, so-called in the EU affordable price for end consumers. We understand that Ukrainian economy and end consumers are not able to pay so much money for electricity produced including from renewable energies. So this aspect also should be taken into consideration, and we have to go and find solutions acceptable for all parts of our discussion, and in that way also bring the issue of green and sustainable energy on a proper development pathway. It should be not over supported, but it should be anyway accepted and promoted by state authorities in each and every country. In that way, I will perhaps stop and just make as a final two bold points. So please consider security as an overarching topic for all Eastern Partnership region, which should be properly reflected in our next strategic documents. And please consider that this region, Eastern Partnership region, would be ready to go according to European aspirations into low carbon future, but needs very special approach and needs perhaps country by country cases in order to make it to make it workable and make it not just a kind of political statement, but the case which will really work. So thank you very much for your attention and looking forward for our next discussion. Thanks.
Andrii, thank you for your observations. And in this, our event, we just took this focus on environment and energy, because in previous one we've done for Ukrainian audience, we took the issues of reforms, anti-corruption, judicial reforms. So I think this aspect is also very important, and we know that it was high on the agenda during the last association council we've had with European Union. Dear friends, I think that we have exhausted our discussion in that way that we have presentations of our speakers. I encourage you to pose your questions in chat. And I make also this possible for our speakers, distinguished speakers, to maybe to comment on the ideas you've heard from other participants of this panel. If there are any volunteers, please flag me and I'll give you the floor.
If I may.
Please, Irina.
I would like to raise the issue of accountability. With the previous 20 deliverables for 2020, there were it was a set of goals set before the governments of 6 Eastern Partnership countries. However, there is no mechanism what to do if the countries are unwilling to do anything on these deliverables. As I mentioned, I was analyzing the Ukraine's implementation of the 13th deliverable on the 10T network, extension of 10T core networks. This deliverable is subdivided into several sub-goals. One of them, I will just give 2 examples of what I mean. One of these sub-goals was to sign bilateral agreements on the single aviation area. In Ukrainian case, Ukraine had already 2 agreements signed before the deliverables were adopted, and during this period, no additional agreements were signed. And so if the country doesn't do anything, what are the consequences? Apart from our report and us experts noting that, okay, Ukraine is doing poorly on this, what's next? And the second example is on the road safety. The indicator here is the number of accidents. Ukraine had adopted a state program on improving road safety until 2020, and it set as a goal to reduce the mortality and injuries and road accidents by 30%. But when I compare the number of incidents between the years 2017 and 2020, there is no change at all. They weren't reduced. And what Ukraine does, it adopts a new strategy and sets again the same goal. So, okay, we will reduce by 30% the number of injuries now by 2024. So my general question for discussion, what is the way out? How can we ensure that there is some accountability for the countries that agree on these deliverables? Thank you.
A question for $1 million or euros. Is there anybody from our speakers who wants to tackle with this complicated issue, accountability? So
I can make a couple of remarks.
Yes, please.
No other volunteer. So indeed, I agree with Irina. These mechanisms are really weak inherently in the way how the roadmap is constructed. So it's basically, these are commitments, but constructed on voluntary basis. So then the governments or the representatives of the governments and the ministries come to the meetings of the Eastern Partnership platforms and panels, and they report on the results. But of course, they report on what they want, right? So it's not. The European institutions, they want to create this, positive spirit of cooperation. And it's very rarely that we would see any accountability mechanism in place. This being said, I mean, there were examples of, especially in case of Moldova, which were related to cutting of the funding, but this was also based on both like bilateral agreements, so the DCFTA and association agreement, and the commitments within the Eastern Partnership. But this was due to the very blatant violation in the rule of law area. So for the new roadmap, was what we as civil society were also suggesting was to really increase a bit this conditionality and accountability mechanism inbuilt in the roadmap. So, and another issue connected to this is this baseline from which we have been starting in 2016, 2017, which was not set, basically. It was not defined. So then when you have a target, as you gave the example with the common aviation area, so the target is 2 agreements, but the baseline was not I don't know precisely, but it's constructed like this. So then when you don't know the starting point, it's quite also, in terms of when you're reporting results, it's a bit open question. And then, so on the new roadmap and the better accountability, so we were suggesting some specific measures, especially for the rule of law area and enabling environment for civil society, how to link it, certain portions of the financial support to the performance indicators, like using tools like CSO meter, and we have many other, indexes and tools which are also constructed by the civil society, which can be used in order to make the performance indicators more clear and also better accountability mechanisms. But yeah, indeed, it's a very complicated question, and inherently the cooperation is based on voluntarily principle, and it's quite difficult in terms of enforcement, so to say.
Thank you, Vera. From our Ukrainian perspective, from civil society, maybe Ira, you know this position, but we still strongly advocate that every country should produce its official report on implementation of the deliverables. If there is no one, it is very difficult. It is very difficult to find somebody in charge of that deliverable or on that deliverable, and that produce some mess in reporting and understanding what's going on the ground. Sometimes we always trying to pick some ideas which are part of our Ukrainian in domestic agenda of reforms and trying to adjust to these deliverables. Sometimes it fits, sometimes it doesn't, but still I think that this kind of reporting in obligatory way, let's put it in that way, could make more discipline to those who deal with this issue. That's my point from Ukrainian perspective.
If I may add, yeah, this is a great idea which should be put in place, and I think Ukraine is also the only EaP country where you have this joint monitoring bodies together with the government. So this was another suggestion from the Civil Society Forum, that there should be this mandatory joint monitoring of the EaP governments and the civil society and other actors, of course, on multi-stakeholder basis, obligatory in terms of monitoring how the implementation of the roadmap is ongoing.
Yeah. Are there if we don't see any other volunteers to make comments or to pose questions, I think we shall call it a day. I think it was a very interesting discussion. We have many projections from different aspects, from politicians, from members of European Parliament, from scholars, from European diplomats. So in my perspective, I think that with this monitoring, both Ukrainian platform and CEPS forum, we're trying to make contributions in decision-making process. Some of the ideas are still to develop, but some ideas are quite interesting to consider as a possible instruments or toolkit for next roadmap. And we are ready, and I think that Vira could share this idea. We're ready to advocate and even to produce some ideas about the mechanism, not only ideas, but mechanism how to implement this toolkit into the decision-making process. With this, I would like to thank you all our panelists. I think it was a brilliant discussion, especially for me as a part of this monitoring process, but I think it also gave us perspective about future horizon, still not very clear-cut, but we understand what are the vectors where European Union intends to advance its thinking and its activity vis-a-vis Eastern partners. I wish you a good day, and I wish you that we have this physical summit in this fall, this autumn. It's very important not to postpone it till another best periods. And I think that we expect for more tailor-made approaches in this roadmap, be it trio of this partnership with association agreement, be it more conditionality for those who do more and who aspire for more. With this, thank you so much. It was our pleasure to have you on board, and have a good day.